My topic on the schedule is the invisible symptoms of MS. Cognition and depression and fatigue and pain too are often considered invisible symptoms of MS because other people can't see them. And for a long time, certainly cognition and fatigue weren't thought to be symptoms of MS, and pain wasn't actually thought to be part of MS. And now we know there are a lot of symptoms of MS that other people can't see. So, fatigue and cognitive changes in depression are invisible symptoms. They're very common MS symptoms. But they're really tricky to deal with for a lot of reasons. And one of the reasons they're tricky to deal with is because they are also symptoms of everyday life. So everybody has experienced fatigue or confusion or mood disruption, whether you have MS or whether you don't. And so, you know, if you think about the things in life that are going to cause you problems, if I asked you, which do you think would cause you the most trouble? A big fire in your kitchen or a slow leak on the back porch roof? Most people would say, I think, that the big fire in the kitchen is going to cause more trouble. And that's probably true in the short run, but there's some advantages to having a big fire in the kitchen. And one of the advantages to having a big fire in the kitchen is you can call the fire department, and it will get treated, and it will get dealt with, and you know what to do, and there's a procedure for managing that, and you can call your insurance agent, and you can call the contractor, and you can get a new kitchen, and it's a problem that will be dealt with. The slow leak on the back porch roof, on the other hand, is a problem that's pretty easy to ignore. So you can have a slow leak going on for a long time, and you notice that maybe when it rains, and you put a bucket there, or you notice that sometimes you think, oh, I ought to do something about that leak on the back porch roof. But you don't, because it never kind of rises to the top of the pile. It doesn't rise to the top of the pile. Well, also, the other problem is you're not quite sure what to do about it, because you could call the contractor, and the contractor would say, well, I think you need to call the roof guy, and the roof guy would say, well, I think you need to, and on and on and on. And so you might not ever even get a real good answer about what you needed to do about it. And the people might not show up in the first place, so it can be really frustrating and not very helpful. So it's a problem that's fairly easy to ignore until the roof caves in. Okay, and then you have a big problem. And I think that some of these problems, fatigue, cognition, and depression in MS are problems like that. They're the slow leak kind of problem. You kind of know that they're there, but you're not really sure if they're a problem, and you're not really sure what you need to do about it. And they don't tend to get attention until they get to be big problems. They can also be symptoms of other medical problems and other medical conditions. They can also be symptoms of each other. So one of the symptoms of depression is fatigue or cognitive changes, or poor concentration. And back and forth and on it goes. So differentiating one from the other and figuring out how to treat them and what you're going to do about them is really complicated. And I think that's the other reason that they often don't get addressed until, as I say, the roof caves in. So it's really complicated, and I think that when we talk about it, we try and separate it into nice piles. You can't really do that, separating these problems one from the other. It's like trying to separate plaid. So we would like to get nice little piles of the gray and the black and the white, but you really can't. So I'm going to talk about them discreetly to give you some information about each one of them, but with the understanding that they are really very much commingled and interwoven with each other. So we talk about cognition. What cognition really is this fancy way of saying thinking. So cognition is how your brain works. Your brain is your computer, and your cognition, your thinking skills help you talk, understand what I'm saying, pay attention to what I'm saying, remember what I'm saying, plan how you're going to get home, plan where you're going to stop for lunch, figure out where you, I don't know, left your car. All of those are parts of cognition. Those are thinking. Cognitive dysfunction is a problem that comes up in MS, and what that really means is it's another way of saying problems with your thinking. So Somewhere in the neighborhood of 45 to 70% of people with MS may experience some cognitive dysfunction. Cognitive dysfunction is not related to disability. It can occur early in the disease, and it can be under-recognized, under-diagnosed, and is often misdiagnosed. I think it's really important at this point to say that cognitive dysfunction is not, sometimes people get this notion about cognitive changes meaning that you've lost your mind, and that's not what this means. So the kinds of areas that are affected by MS, so if you think about your brain as, if you think about you as kind of a small business, your brain is in the business of, it's the, your administrative office, and it's in the business of running you. So it's got discrete departments. So you got your information processing, and you got your file room, your memory system, and you have your ability to pay attention and concentrate. You have your ability to find words so that you can talk and say what you want to say, or solve problems, or visual spatial abilities is like your ability to figure out how to put the paper in the Xerox machine in the right way and put the thing in the fax so that it doesn't print blank. That's a visual and spatial ability, which I don't have. And executive functioning is just your ability to handle the whole thing. And so when people have kind of a global dementia, it's like the office shuts down. But when people have problems with MS, they can have problems in one or two areas of this. It's not a kind of a global thing. So it can be more like, if this makes sense, the girl in the mailroom is out on maternity leave, and the file clerk is working half-time. So it's not that the office shuts down, but it's the efficiency and the smoothness with which the office operates is a bit disrupted. So you kind of have to shift activities around. And that's I think, the way that I think about cognitive changes in MS. It's not like you haven't lost your mind, you've just lost the file room clerk. So some people with MS, probably a third of people don't have any cognitive problems or any changes. Maybe half have one area affected, so they have one discrete area that doesn't work very well. And sometimes people have pretty severe cognitive problems where they have multiple areas affected, but that's not the norm. So what follows on the next two slides are examples of cognitive dysfunction. And so anybody reading this, whether you have MS or not, if you look at this list, would think that you have cognitive dysfunction. Okay, because good grief. Because there are a lot of different things that can disrupt the way we think. And so when you think about cognitive problems, an occasional trouble remembering, or word-finding problems, or trouble with making decisions, that doesn't necessarily mean you have a cognitive problem, but you're looking for kind of a pattern of these kinds of things. But all of us can have trouble remembering or trouble thinking of the word that we want to say. I was trying to buy a cell phone the other day, and I noticed that I had a profound inability to understand what was said to me, and a difficulty following the instructions. And then when I did get the cell phone, I couldn't figure out how to use it and how to turn it on. And then I kept calling people by accident because my fingers were too fat. So I'm going to take it back. So most of us have forgotten thoughts in mid-sentence. Sometimes people get poor performance reviews at work for a lot of different reasons. So the point of all of this is that there are a lot of things that can be signs of cognitive problems. The kinds of things that people with MS say to me commonly that make me start thinking that maybe they're having some problems. Poor performance review at work in someone who has generally had good performance can be an indicator that people are having more trouble with their thinking because they're having more trouble just doing their job. Things are going a bit more slowly. And the thing I was talking about before is kind of the slowdown. There's reduced functioning in a couple of areas, which is just slowing down the whole process. Sometimes people tell me that they get lost, that they have a harder time finding places, and that they'll get lost driving somewhere. Another thing that's a common thing that people say is that they have trouble following a recipe when they're trying to cook. That if it's at all complicated and they have to go to the flour, back to the recipe, and then they get back to the recipe and they can't remember how much flour they were supposed to have, and back and forth and back and forth. So these are kinds of things that can be signs of cognitive problems. Another thing, actually, that can be a sign of a cognitive problem. Sometimes marital fights, spats, people arguing more. I've had it happen more than once, that someone will come into my office and they're not getting along, and we'll pick it apart. And what it turns out is that they're having a lot more arguments, and they're having arguments about, but I told you that, no you didn't, yes you did, no you didn't, back and forth. And that's because maybe people aren't remembering what was said.